Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Freeformers Unplugged, streaming live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and for some godforsaken reason on Twitch as well. As we do, 1 p.m. British summertime, or British or Greenwich Mean Time, depending
Plus
on
one.
what part of the year is.
Oh
Plus
yeah,
one. No, British summertime isn't. Yeah, okay.
is
Anyway,
plus one.
regardless of time zone, you join us on a Friday, potentially, if you're not in Australia, which would be very bizarre. You should go to bed and not listen to watch us. But we're back. You might be also listening on podcast as well, just as a recap episode. And I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host, Emilie Forrest, who is snotty and tired. How are you doing apart from those two variables?
I've got a cough as well, and a sore throat.
Hey, well, you got the holy
Got the
trinity.
hat trick. Yeah. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm fatiguing. That's not even a word. I'm getting fatigued very quickly again. So yeah, we'll see how this rolls. But that's okay. I feel like this is a topic on which you have lots to say. I have some horror stories I can share. We'll make it through.
Well, let's not talk about illnesses anymore. We don't want to be thinking about the cusp of another pandemic anytime soon. Naming no specific cruise ships, but yeah, we watch again the world passing by with saying, yeah, it's probably fine. I mean, and let's genuinely hope it is. Today's topic is why hospitality people make better humans at work. We are both slightly biased in this because we have both worked in hospitality. But I believe it to be a fundamental truth because the best people I have met at work have worked in hospitality, and the worst people I've met at work haven't. So I can't quantify that with any kind of substantial data other than this. What do you call it? Anecdata.
Anecdata, yeah.
But this is the case. This is debate club that we're doing today. We're going to argue our case, and because it's going to be a very one-sided argument. So if you are in chat watching live and have or haven't worked in hospitality, let us know. I also would put retail in there as well. Any kind of what people term to call frontline workforce, right? When you're at the coalface of those customer interactions. I think, particularly in your formative years, I think are really important. So, well, let's just start by clarifying, in terms of this debate that we're going to have, what skin in the game do we have? So, Emilie, tell me about your hospitality career.
So from 16 to 18, I was waitress and then worked on the bar at a golf club, very fancy. It wasn't like, so we had customers, but they were customers who generally were they're a bit posh. So they were quite posh. There was a lot of nice old ladies, and there was a lot of dickhead old men. There were some nice old men as well, but then there were also those kind of like the boomer era who were a bit younger, who were probably actually like only in their 50s or what have you. But yeah, very kind of arrogant and twatish, I would say. There's might be quite a bit of swearing going on in this episode, or words that perhaps you might not want small people to hear. So yeah, warning, having already said a couple. And then afterwards, while I was at uni, so aged 19 to 22-ish, I worked again as a waitress, but that was a Mitchells and Butler one. It was like a little bit of a like nicer. It was a nice pub area, but yeah, waitress and worked on the bar in a nice pub. And I did just check my LinkedIn history. None of these are on my LinkedIn history, so it's okay. I can say what I want.
Mine are on my LinkedIn history. We are joined by Rocket in chat. Hello, Rocket. I know Rocket has a lot to say when it comes to humans and hospitality, having, his mum being a restaurateur, and when he was on our sister podcast, let's say, Work Sucks, certainly mentioned a lot about his mum and his work in the hospitality industry. So hello, Rocket. Hope you're having a lovely day. Do let us know if any of this resonates, which I'm sure it will. My hospitality credentials. So my dad owned and ran not a chain of pubs because they were all different, but pubs, 5 or 6, predominantly in the seaside town of Mablethorpe on the east coast of England, which I can't say is the most glamorous place in the world. There's a great album by British Sea Power, and the album is called Faded Seaside Glamour, and that is what I would say about every UK seaside town. They all have a little bit of faded seaside glamour to them, unfortunately.
Mm.
Um, and so, especially in the off season, those pubs were not for holiday makers; they were for locals. And then my dad made his way inland and ultimately set up a pub in a little town called Louth, a little bit further inland. I went even further inland to the city of Lincoln and had 2 bars there. And I pretty much worked in one, two, three of them. Then he also did outside bars, so I did those. I was cheap labour, I think, is what the lesson here. Um, I don't think he was breaking any employment rules, so let's not research into that. But essentially, and I also worked at a cricket club as well. So I've done outside bars, cricket clubs at like village fetes and car festivals and all that kind of stuff, pubs. And then I got so annoyed with customers that I then became a chef because then I didn't have to deal with customers. But you still hear a lot of what the waiting staff and the front of house staff are dealing with because you get the tears, the frustration, and all of those conversations. You know, as a chef, you tend to then be the outlet because you can do that, you know, behind closed doors. So I think let's stick to restaurants
Mhm.
probably because I think that's because restaurants, it depends on the type of restaurant you work in, right? Is that it seems to be these destinations that capture all walks of life. And I think when I've been reflecting on it, it seems that when you work in hospitality, you get to observe and interact with all walks of life, regardless if you're in that class, in that group of individuals. You will probably interact with them. So, well, I mean, first and foremost, do you agree?
Depends on the restaurant, I would say, which I think you probably did caveat that slightly long sentence with. Yeah, no, I think it does depend on the restaurant. I think like there are some people who will never walk into a Nando's, right? But then there are some people who will never go into a high-end five-star restaurant. But as you said, there are lots of different people from lots of different walks of life, and the reason why somebody is there is very different. And I think like as waiting staff, you kind of start to understand the types of customers you have inherently. You understand someone who's come in that's come in for a special occasion. So where I worked, particularly, it was the nice pub on the edge of town, closer to the university, at university related things, graduation time, freshers week, like we were absolutely rammed with university families, 100% rammed. The rest of the time, I mean, we were always busy, but the rest of the time, you might have like couples going out for meals, or you'd have families earlier, and you kind of understand that everybody had a different reason for being there, a different job to do. And so, like thinking back on it now, you are bucketing these groups of people into personas, right? Into the job to be done. If you want to use Clay Christensen's language, they come for a purpose, but that purpose is very different. And then how you interact as waiting staff is very different. If you've got, a middle-aged table and you're just very charming and very nice, probably works better if you look like me than you, I don't know, you're going to get more tips. You kind of the way you joke around. If you're there, people are on a date, you don't get too involved. In fact, you keep quite a distance. Again, particularly maybe if you look at I do, or when you were 22 or what have you. um so I think that, yeah, you kind of automatically learn to read people and their situation and adapt your behavior accordingly.
I have never thought of it like that. That's super interesting because I think the thing again reflecting on preparing for this live stream was that you then take that into your career, right? This idea of interacting with different people. I think I well, one of the things I didn't really understand what I was doing, but like chameleoning, like I would do that, but completely by accident in most cases. Like I just do it. I mean, when I was 10, I met an Australian kid on holiday and I started speaking with an Australian accent for no reason. But like I didn't even realize I was doing it. That was this kind of thing. So, you know, there are this element of being to be a chameleon and adapt to your environment or adapt to the customer in front of you, right? Particularly in pubs, because again, you get all walks of life. You get the people that knocking on the door at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning who want to get in. The way you interact with them to the people that are coming out for a Friday, Saturday night are very, very different. And then everywhere in between to those moments where people are celebrating or they're just, you know, with the student bar I worked in Lincoln, they were building a new building next to it whilst I worked there. And so at the end of every single day, all the builders would come in and have a pint or two before potentially using a vehicle to get home from work. But like, in what other walk of life would I be interacting with construction workers, builders? Like, well, I don't. There's no other industry where I'd be interacting with those people. And I think when you look at particularly consultancies, right, that they may work with construction companies, or even HR and L&D teams may work inside a construction in construction firm. But how often are you on the front line interacting with those individuals? Now, at the time, I was doing it quite passively because I was just like, wow, these people are different. And I'm talking to them and having that conversation. I'm behind the bar, so I have to talk to them. I can't just watch the TV unless I did watch the TV when we were quiet. But you start picking up the different motivations and people of how they see the world. Particularly in a political environment, right, that we are in now. I have a huge amount of understanding of why some people think the way they do. Do I agree with it? Probably not, but I can at least have an understanding of how that person or that group of people would get to that thinking. And I think the thing I see from people who haven't worked in hospitality or retail is that level of naivety that everyone assumes that everyone thinks and acts in the way they do in a rational way or a perceived rational way. I've worked with a number of people. I'm going to try very carefully, but a number of people who essentially manage and lead from their own experience of the world, which is kind of almost the only thing it's not the only thing you can do, but the real lack of empathy and understanding of how anyone might think differently is so far beyond them that they essentially become bad leaders, because it's like, well, I think everyone in the world thinks like this, and we could tangent off into neurodiversity, right? But in any form of point of difference from one human to another, it's a hugely arrogant perspective to lead or manage someone, I would say. It's fair enough that you may have grown up not having that empathy and understanding of other people's experiences and mindsets and barriers in society and all that kind of stuff. I appreciate that not everyone grows up in a world where they have exposure to that. However, the option you have when you're an adult is to be curious and open up a conversation to those experiences. And I just don't think that happens a lot.
No, and it's a strong argument for diversity in the workplace, right? It's one that's been made many, many times, why you should have diversity of thought and diversity of experience. But absolutely, a role in hospitality in particular, one of the benefits is you do have access, you do interact with so many different people. And the idea is you do have to treat them kind of all the same. I mean, it's not exactly the same. Like I said earlier, you adapt your behavior based on their wants and their needs. Some things will be very transactional, some things will be a lot more it will still be transactional, because that's basically what it is at the end of the day, but there's be a lot more interactive and a lot more of a emotional rapport type thing going on. So yeah, no, it's a very interesting point. I can't say I remember too many construction workers, but we did have a large like Polish community as well, and again, so that's another community that I hadn't had much exposure to before, and then had afterwards.
But likewise, I not a large Polish community in the pubs and restaurants I worked in. So already you have exposure to a group that I haven't had. I think the weird thing, I just go back to the student bar a second. Now because I've never really unpacked this, but it was on a university campus, obviously, not obviously, but essentially it was right next to halls of residence. So during term time, there'd be loads of students, and I was also a student, so that kind of makes sense. They're kind of your people. Of course, there's a huge difference within that category of people as well. But then there was the building site that was going on, and then it was closed. The university obviously was kind of closed for the summer, so you just got locals in. And the other
into the student union bar.
It wasn't a student union bar; it was just a student bar, so it wasn't necessarily run by the union.
Okay. When you say student bar, I just have thinking of my student union bars. I can't imagine locals would ever go in there; they wouldn't want to.
So there was 3 bars on campus. One was run by the SU. There was 2 that weren't. Anyway, doesn't really matter.
I
Anyway,
know, but I'm just fascinated. Like, this is much less of a, we have something to say specific, more of a, a deep dive into some of these stories we haven't ever explored before. So I want to know the details.
So the bar was on Brayford Marina in the centre of Lincoln, and
Okay.
therefore you had holiday makers who had boats who would moor up,
Okay.
and
Okay.
it's the closest pub to their boat. So they
Gotcha.
would come in
Gotcha.
and have food and drink. So in that pub at any one point, I'd have students,
Tourists.
tourists, builders. During out of season, they let out the halls of residence to other people. So I met one of my very good friends, Graham. He was on a work placement for an electricity company, an energy company, and he's going to university in Glasgow, rocked up in Lincoln for summer, and he was like, "Well, that was the nearest place to him." So this one place, and I think there's a lot of sitcoms that kind of play on this trope. That the pubs and restaurants tend to be these kind of catch-all. They bring lots of different people in at any single moment in time. I look at the bar I worked at after that. The regular who was always propping up the bar, Potato Dave, because there was also another Dave. So Potato Dave. He was a truck driver, and you'll never guess what he had in his truck. Potatoes. But man in his 50s, lived alone, lived down the road. He would come in all the time. And then we had two people that are absolutely horrendously filthy rich and owned like the biggest house in Lincoln. And these three people were drinking and eating in the same place. And so it's absolutely fascinating. They never talked to each other, interacted with each other. But even Beth worked in that bar as well, my wife. You start to understand these different walks of life that I don't think I'm going to ever be a truck driver. I don't think. I think if it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. I also don't think I'm going to own the biggest house in a certain city at any point. I don't think I want to live in a city, so that's never going to happen either. But I've had conversations with them. I understand, loosely how they live their life, their motivations, how they go about stuff. And I don't know, is it because it happened at an early stage in my career, between the ages of 18 and 22, 23, where they're kind of, I'm forming my view of the world, so they're more impactful. If I went back, I think if I still went back into hospitality, I'd still absorb that kind of understanding of different cultures and experiences that people bring into hospitality.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think there's an element of it in your formative years, but I also think there's potentially a little bit of correlation going on, as in the people that go out and find a job when they're quite young, particularly if it's not a job that they then stay into for career. Maybe there's a bit of a drive there, and maybe that also suggests a certain personality type. For example, my husband never worked in hospitality. I still say he's a pretty well-rounded person, but he did work. He just was smart about it and worked in places which were actually going to help him get a leg up on his career, and he got paid a lot more than I did, which you might say is an intelligent way of doing it, but it hasn't necessarily had the same exposure that we have had. What else do I think? I've forgotten where I was going with that. So there might be a little bit of correlation between, and the types of jobs that you can get when you are 16, 18 are fairly limited, right? Because you don't really have any skills or any experience at that age.
I was trying to think other kind of businesses that might have this come one call. Like McDonald's is quite an interesting one, because I think that must catch a large variety of different people, because it's people travel, it's not a destination. It's like, oh, I'm driving past this and I need to stop and have some rest and food on the way or whatever. But for some, it might be a destination, right, as well. But increasingly in that kind of environment, it's less about the human to human contact. It's about tapping on a machine and quick delivery of stuff.
Yeah.
And so whilst there may be a large footfall of different people through there, the human interaction, although we joke and meme Karens of the world, I think that's the only reason you get that memeable content of a Karen, is that because there's so many people in hospitality and retail that have seen it, and it is memeable, because it's like, well, we know that persona type.
So this is quite interesting, and one thing I was going to bring up actually is I saw a post on Reddit a while ago saying something along the lines of, would you now encourage your teenage son or daughter to get a job in hospitality now? Because things have changed a lot even in the past like 15 years since I last worked in hospitality, things have changed a lot. There's more machines, there's less interaction, but people are ruder, people are more like, I want it now, now, now. There's a lot less understanding, and hospitality workers have to go through an awful lot of shit, quite frankly. They have to go
Yeah,
through
yeah.
so much. And actually now, like as a parent, my kids are obviously way too young, but in 15 years, would I want them to do that? I don't know. It's character building for sure. You get a lot out of it, but is it harder now than it used to be?
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, I think my wife Beth routinely has nightmares about the bar we both worked in together. Like, she
Even though
doesn't
you
work
left
there for
like
20
over
years.
15, yeah, 20
Yeah,
years.
yeah, 50,
Oh,
more
poor
15 years
Beth.
ago. But still, that trauma of certain situations. One of my best friends made Beth cry at work as well. Like, one of the chefs made Beth cry, and it wasn't anything the chef did. It was that the customers were being so horrible. The chef Sergio, he won't mind me saying this. I mean, if I could tell the list of things I could tell you Sergio's done in hospitality is untold. But there is that level of yeah. Is it harder now? I think there are people tend to be angrier. I think you're probably right.
Mm,
And we've probably all with our fair share of shit customers. But I think I think it's good to experience that. Like, it's not nice. It's not
mm,
nice, but actually you understand that there are some dickheads in the world, and life isn't easy. Um, and you're going to come across those. I think I'm just trying to like give like a very polarizing. What's the opposite, right? So someone who used to work with had worked at Deloitte for a number of years and encouraged their children to go and work at Deloitte as well. So they left school, they went to university, they went to work for Deloitte. And you can imagine they did maybe an accountancy, business management degree, whatever, right? And so if you think of that journey, I'm going to assume, rightly or wrongly, that they may have been privately educated based on this person's wealth. But I cannot say that substantially. But let's say that is the journey: private school to university to one of the big four consultancies. How much exposure in that journey, unless you go and do work outside of your studies, which let's say hypothesize that the financial security that this individual may have may mean that they don't need to. Um, in that situation, you're not going to get the experience of different people necessarily, other than the people you're studying with. But I imagine it's going to be, yeah. I did a media degree, right? There's a type that went and did a media degree. Like, I'm going to throw shade at myself. Like, there's a type.
was it you? Were you the type?
But there's also then the type that do business management degrees. I never met anyone that did a business management degree. We weren't hanging out in the same circles. I met other people doing media, um, and uh, biochemical science, which
Okay.
yeah, well, which is very weird. I lived with two people that wanted to be forensic scientists, but
What are they
again, that was
doing
just
now? Oh
I
no,
don't
my
know.
headset's about to die.
They were both
Oh,
called Sarah as well.
okay.
So anyway, the if you try and design the opposite path, I can see how quite easily there's a lack of diversity. And even I was talking to someone yesterday about the gender gap, right, in the workplace. And one of the things that came up in that conversation wasn't about gender at all, but it was when you put graduates and apprentices on the same program inside a large consultancy. What happens? The
Huh.
apprentices feel like the black sheep. They feel like they are ostracized because they're different. They don't fit in with everyone else, and life is much harder for them. Which is true, because it's the environment they're entering to doesn't appreciate. While it may want to try and appreciate that bringing them in might be useful, it doesn't have any comprehension of how to work with those individuals, because the people managing them, unless they've been apprentices themselves at some point, are highly unlikely to be able to manage. So you've got like ex graduates up going through this kind of system, and then kind of go, okay, cool, manage someone different than you. Here you go, do that. And what's going to happen in that situation? Unless you've got a very forward-thinking leader that's empathetic, caring, and curious, it's like a computer says, no, I do not know how to manage. This person is unmanageable. So, and that I fail to believe that most people are not unmanageable. that you've got to manage them differently, and that's hard. But also, you're a leader. You're getting paid to be a leader. That's the hard bit about leadership that you kind of have to do. Otherwise, quite frankly, don't be a leader.
Well, I think the system that a lot of leaders find themselves in doesn't support them to be good leaders to everybody, because the whole employee experience is usually fit to a certain type within an organization, drastically different depending on what the organization is, of course. And like you said, they tend to draw on their own experience, but people are so pressed for time. They don't have the time necessarily to do all the one-to-ones that they're supposed to do, to necessarily tailor things to support people finding their feet in a way, because it's very much, because so much work is transactional. And I think that, yeah, even people with the best will in the world don't necessarily have all the time they need, I think. So I do think it's not fair to always say you're a bad leader because you don't understand how to manage someone when you're working in a system that doesn't support you to do that.
I completely agree, and hopefully that context is clipped up in a clip that it does. Toby has a go at leaders, because look, we've worked with and managed and been in project teams with people that are vastly different to us on various different levels, and it's hard and it's frustrating. But it's also no one's particular fault in that situation, other than there's two different approaches, two different ways of thinking and doing, not one necessarily being correct. We may have a preference. Well, we certainly would have a preference for the way we do things. And some of that takes time, right? So, you and I have two very different approaches to work and doing in fact, two very different approaches to doing almost everything. Every facet of our
Yeah,
lives and work is
pretty much.
is different.
And sometimes it's incredibly frustrating.
It is, but there is enough. Yes, it is. Sorry, I flipped just like, oh yeah, it is, but it's fine. But we're able to work through it. Now we're fortunate enough that we're small enough, and there's just the two of us, that we have that time, and in the trust equation, the intimacy, right? We have that knowledge and awareness of each other's situations, and I think that's probably the missing bit, because we talk about like the manual of me type activities. What pieces of information and conversations do you need to have to understand the person in front of you? Because yes, you can do something like an insights discovery profile and understand what color they are. That's one thing that kind of works. But then there's also this whole human outside the world of work that impacts how they show up at work, which is always changing, because at one point you're a parent, and at one point you're not a parent. At one point you're buying a house, you're not buying a house. There's all these moments in life that means a movable feast as well. But then there's that third element. It's about, well, what experiences got you here in the first place, and what journey have you been to get here? And I don't think ever in my career I have intentionally gone to seek out that information. Now, whether I've had the time or curiosity desire, but like, so how did you get here? Like, what has driven you to get to this moment in time? Because I suppose it might be, you might say that, well, that's superfluous information. I don't need to know that. We're on the project. Let's just get on and do the project.
I've asked it, but only normally as a small talk point of conversation. I think it's important to know, but it's not part of a kickoff for a project. Or you might do it when you welcome somebody new into a team. You ask them, oh, how did you get here? But normally it's around, oh, what did you do before, rather than what are your specific motivations and drivers, what's really important to you. Because like I was just reflecting a little bit on myself. I was thinking earlier about where I chose to work when I was 16, and it's because I'm fiercely independent as a person. And I did not want my parents' help with anything, which was a bit daft really at 16. But like I insisted on paying my own phone bill with my money that I earned, and then they paid my sister's phone bill till she was like 24, which I'm still a bit salty about. But it was my own choice, really.
That's all right. You can calculate and backdate those payments.
It's fine. It's fine. But I didn't.
Yeah, it does sound like you're over it. It sounds like you're over it.
I didn't need to work. I wanted to work. And so I wanted to spend my Saturday whole day Saturday, and then I did like a couple of evening shifts as well. And then I was thinking about, so that independence, that's really what's driven me throughout. And I think that's probably partly why I'm here today, right? Running my own thing, because I really value my independence. It's really important. But then nobody's ever really had that conversation with me, other than, in an interview, what's your strengths and weaknesses? oh, I'm quite independent and I take the initiative. Great, okay, cool. But then actually there's sometimes a weakness. Don't be too independent. We want you to fit in this box. People don't really dig under to really find out what motivates us. And I think this really tackles into our human-centered design approach that we talk about so often, is that really understanding what makes a person tick, what drives them, is hard to do. You have to be curious. You have to listen empathetically. And so many people just don't have the time, the headspace, or the environment to do that, or they just simply don't care sometimes. And I'll tell you that other people who are excellent at doing this a lot is some neurodivergent people. And the reason why they do it is because they don't do it naturally, because they've had to learn it. I have someone very close to me who's like this, who is just knows exactly what to say in every situation because they've learned it, because they've observed people and they've worked out this is what you say in this situation. And they have given me so much good advice that I've just been like, what are you talking about? That's rubbish. And then it's always blown up in my face whenever I don't take the advice. So I think really taking the time to study and to understand, to be curious about people, like it serves you well, but most people just don't do it.
It's very like the the journey I went on in my head whilst you were talking was because I was following you, but the starting point was that story about the phone bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to name them your sister. She's not watching. She's at school.
Oh, she's not watching. She's not even on LinkedIn.
Well, there we go.
She's like, why do I need LinkedIn? No, you can. I mean, it's proof. If we find out who my sister is, you can name drop her.
It's fine. Anyway, but that story alone is very. I hear that and go, yeah, well, story checks out. Of course, that makes absolute sense. But that's because I know you, right? But I think even just telling that one story to someone who doesn't know is like, because I never acted that way. And I none of my friends acted that way. So you tell me that, and you go, "What were you, some sort of psychotic 16-year-old? Why did you want to go out every Saturday at work? Why did you want this independent like that?" That is so different from how I would have been at 16. I just can't even fathom it. So there's that curiosity. Is like, "Ooh, I want to explore that more." But I think even the story, like I say, is telling. The issue is what question and environment did we put you in to kind of for you to tell me that story? Because I've never heard that before, right?
We put it in a live stream where we were talking about formative experiences and how that affects who we are today. Like there is, yeah, and that's a very deep and personal question. And I'm telling you because, like you said, we have intimacy in that, and from the trust equation, I trust you. Also, I don't really mind who else hears it, but I'm not just going to bring that up on my first day of work.
No, and you're not going to bring it up in an interview. Well, an interview wouldn't enable you to bring that up, I would hazard a guess, is that's not the design of an interview. But I was talking to someone else yesterday, and we talk about purpose, values, whatever. It's like in a small organization, no, let's backtrack a bit. I talked about us because what we're trying to do and fix in the world of work, we're aligned on. Broadly speaking, we're aligned on. But the journey of how we got to that point is very, very different. The stories, the experiences that happened to get to that point. It just so happens we've got mutual alignment in what the problems are and how we might potentially go and fix it, right? And so that's really useful. And I believe that most startups, if they have a solo founder, of course there's alignment because it's just one person. You have to be aligned with yourself. But if there are two founders, there's probably that broad alignment as well. I think of one. I think of the three organizations I worked at before this. I think that's all very different kind of experiences and lifestyles that brought the founders of two or more together, but they all were kind of unified by, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. Now the issue is when you bring someone else into that dynamic, is usually you've brought someone else into that dynamic under the guise of employment rather than co-founding. And so that relationship is very, very different with the mission and purpose of the organization, because that person doesn't necessarily have experiences in a journey that would lead them to go, oh, well, this mission's really important. They might do, but they also might not, because they might also just want to go, I want to do this job. I really like doing this job and I want to do it. Don't really care what the organization is. And I think about one of our clients, there are almost half and half inside the organization. Half of them are there because they have lived experience of what the mission of that organization is. The other half are kind of go, this is just like my job and this is what I do. And, it's cool that we do this, but it's not like my MO. And so when you try and bring in this generic catch-all approach to purpose and values, of course it never works, because everyone is there for distinctly different reasons. And this is the massive undoing of Brewdog, right? And which James Watt reflects on himself is like, what's the phrase you use? Like, no one will ever love your company as much as you do.
Yeah.
And so therefore no one will behave. And even if you become an employee-owned trust, and we know this for a fact, having spoken to some employee trust, even becoming an employee-owned trust does not generate the behavior and the mindset of someone who has co-founded, grown, and managed that company from an infant to a teenager.
Yeah, it's kind of like kids, right? Like literally like kids. No one loves your kids like you do. Like
No,
other people will love your kids
in the nicest possible way. I don't love your kids more than my own kids. I think that's an obvious statement, though, isn't it?
I think that's fine. You don't have to love my kids. But like other, and you can appreciate, and then there's how close you are to the child. Obviously, there are some, like, I would say I love my friends' kids, but not in the way that I love my kids,
And
if you know what I mean.
So that's fine. Yeah.
Well, I'm not okay. I mean, like my friends who I see every single day.
You see the kids.
I see the children every single day. Like I've met Nora in person once, and I've never met Ezra.
Yeah.
Sorry, I suddenly was like, am I meant to not say their names? I couldn't remember.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Just don't show pictures of them. That's fine.
Okay. We've gone on such a tangent here. We were talking about hospitality.
We were talking about hospitality. So what were we just talking about? Oh, so understanding the experiences that you get to where you are. So I think, so when I kind of pitched at the beginning, like this debate club, I don't think it's in dispute, just because no one's come up with the comments and no one else is here talking to us, but happy retrospectively for someone to dispute it, that people in hospitality make great people at work, but I don't think exclusively. I think
you get bad eggs everywhere, right?
Yeah, but I think what we're exploring here is the level of exposure to different people and situations. The more you have it, the more you may be inclined to design different environments for a collective group of people. And I think that's the output of this conversation, right? And the thing we always talk about is that let's just go to our very first live stream this year, where we compared the 4 employer brands. And if you haven't watched it, season 3, episode 1, I think it is. We looked at 4 employer brands, and all of them, in some sort of language, said diversity is our superpower. That icky phrase. But what you know for a fact is that they try and bring in this diversity and then treat everyone the same when they come in, from a position of, because I was always of the opinion it was because you're designing it from the organization's needs and wants, and I still think that's true. But anybody who has a hand in designing that employee experience probably also designs it from their own experiences and desires and what they would do in that situation, which is why L&D is rubbish, because learning people love learning. And so therefore, the books, the frameworks, all this stuff, like they absolutely get off on it. And therefore think sometimes, and this isn't everyone, of course, I just do it for clickbait, but like that not everyone in your organization is going to care about this stuff as much as you. So you have to work harder at creating the motivation and the care, rather than just dropping there. Hey, read The Trusted Advisor as a book, because it's a really great way of building trusted relationships with your peers and clients and whatever.
Literally, nobody is going to do that.
Exactly. Other people in L&D will. They'll go, wow, this framework's incredible, and blah, blah, blah. And I was working with a head of L&D this week who turned around, and this is why I love working with this head of L&D, because it's so fucking refreshing in that there were 3 kind of core principles, like leadership books and frameworks. And it's like, he just turned around and goes, well, none of this actually matters because no one really cares about it. What do they care about is doing X, Y, and Z. And so all of these books and these frameworks are really useful, and we'll talk about them from an L&D perspective and design all that stuff. But the end user doesn't care. How are we getting them to have better feedback conversations is what we're working on.
how is this going to make me better at my job? Making me better at my job looks like, probably to me, depends, on might have different motivations. How do I serve my clients better? How do I problem solve and get satisfaction out of this job? Or how do I progress to the next level and get paid more? That
So
is what the person cares about.
if we look, and let's close it and wrap it with this, right? The Cone B model: capability, opportunity, motivation, changes, behavior. When we look at creating an experience that appreciates different people's backgrounds, their experiences, and their journey, and how they got to that job. When we hire someone, we're kind of hiring against capability, but also assumed capability, because you're assuming that the CV is the capability when actually it's not. It's just a list of things that happened, but not a list of things that happened that are actually meaningful in what we've just described. Actually, if you, based on this conversation, went, what would be most useful to write on a CV? It would almost be, people will say, I don't need your life story, but it would be almost your life story, right? That would be kind of the useful thing.
But it wouldn't be the step by step by step. I did this and then I did
No.
this and then I did this. It would be, well, how did all of those incremental moments shape who you are today as a person?
And so it's not about capability. It's not necessarily about opportunity. It's more about that mindset, right? Is what mindset do you bring to your work? Because capability, you can give someone capability or help them with capability. You can give people the opportunity. You can't necessarily just give motivation. You have to align motivation, I think.
Yep.
And so what comes out of this is, out of that, I said to this person yesterday that was talking about the values and purpose stuff, I said, one of the exercises that we did, which I think is incredibly useful, and I haven't really gone back to it in a while. No, I went back to it last week, actually. That's why it came up in conversation. And I can't remember why I went back to it. But we have essentially detailed our life story and how that story brought us to where we are today, and those moments that matter. I haven't heard everything. You know, for example, the pay my own phone bill story wasn't in there. And probably not relevant to the formation of this thing that we're doing, but relevant to your mindset and how you approach work and life, for sure. But we essentially have these little life stories, like these 7 or 8 key moments that kind of led us to where we are. And that wasn't a difficult activity to do, I don't think.
I found it quite challenging to really because I've got a load of stories, I've got memories that really stick out at me. And then trying to work out, though, which ones really affected me and who I am I found that harder to work out. So I just kind of splurged everything.
But I think that's useful because, like, you splurged everything, and it was like, well, because you did it in voice note form, and I listened to it, right? Because
while I was driving, I seem to remember. Oh wait, car, you need to go in your lane. All those kind of things whilst I drive.
I think it was just under an hour, and I found that incredibly insightful because, like, this like, there were stories that you never come. And likewise, I did the same, right? I don't think I sent you voice note transcriptions. I think I gave you an 80-page document. Because when AI first started being popularized, I went, I want to make an AI in me. So I'm going to literally detail my whole life story to create Toby GPT. Incredibly useful for me.
Also known as a digital twin.
Is that what we're calling it? A digital twin. And so, well, now that allows us to pass what is relevant to what we're saying. And, you know, as part of sales and marketing conversations, that's how you know the stories. It isn't because of the Toby GPT or the book. It's because
I hear them every week, over and over and over and over and over and over again.
It's not that I'm for our dear listener and viewer, it's not that I'm just repeating these stories to Emilie just to really embed them. It's part of the sales and marketing narrative. This is the journey that I went on to get to here, and that's what substantiates our approach. And what I say and what Emilie says about that is different because they're very, you know, personal things. Or sometimes everybody might say, well, Toby has a story about this. But so I think we've double clicked, to use one of our clients' best phrases, into the motivation.
I hate jargon. We've gone a bit off the rails. I'm getting a bit delirious now. I'm getting a bit delirious, like, from this cold and this conversation.
So
What have we done?
motivation,
We've double
it's not
clicked.
that easy. Motivation is not that easy. We've done a little bit of a deep dive on motivation, I think, is what we've ended up here, which is what we kind of do on Freeformers Unplugged. We pick a topic, we talk about it, and see where we get to at the end. And I don't think I would have called this a live stream about understanding people's motivation at work and designing for it, but that's kind of what we have done. Emilie, is there anything else you would say in summary for this fascinating tangential episode of Freeformers Unplugged?
No, I think let's leave our listeners and viewers in peace now.
And you in peace. I hope you get well soon, and we will both see you next week for another episode of Freeformers Unplugged. Catch you later.
Bye.